everybody, I'm Rebecca Virginia. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you 10 of my favorite fall DIYs. Let's get started. The first DIY in today's video is a fall festive welcome pumpkin sign. Here are all of the supplies that you'll need to make this farmhouse DIY on your own. The Dollar Tree currently has out these wallpaper pieces, and I accidentally forgot to hit the record button, but all I did was take a square sign from the Dollar Tree, then one of these wallpaper removables, and I just stuck it down onto our sign, and then with this fun roller tool that I got from Mod Podge, I'm just really pressing down to make sure the sign is nice and adhered. I love this. I didn't have to do any painting on the sign. I just got to stick the wallpaper on and it was done. I also found these cute tin gather pumpkins at the Dollar Tree. So I'm going to end up painting that as well as 2 paint sticks. I'm taking the shade Territorial Beige and painting both of our paint sticks. And then just to prime the pumpkin before I start going in with colors, I painted our entire tin pumpkin white, again, just to act as a primer before we start putting down some colors into our pumpkin. To make our paint sticks look a bit more rustic, I'm just going in with a stippling brush that I got in the Crafter's Square section and some darker brown paint and distressing the wood and adding a bit more definition. Once my pumpkin was dried, I went in with the shade Pumpkin by Waverly and painted the entire tin pumpkin, and then I took a brown color for the stem before going in with lots of different colors. I made this one, it almost looks pink. It's a bit of red, and then I added in some white and black paint. So I kind of made my own paint color, and my goal is to kind of make this look like a sunset. So I added in the red to the orange, and now I'm going back in with my stippling brush and some white paint, and really just having fun going back and forth with lots of colors until I got the desired look that I liked on my pumpkin. Now we are moving on to actually assembling our sign. So I decided to cut the paint sticks using these miter shears. I'll have them linked in my Amazon shop down below. I really like them for cutting really everything, but especially wood pieces. And I'm just lining those up on the top and bottom of my sign. I laid the pumpkin and the welcome galvanized piece all out, and then once I was happy with how everything looked, I fired up my hot glue gun and started gluing down everything into place. Be careful when you use the hot glue on the tin pumpkin and the galvanized welcome sign because the tin heats up and it can be quite hot, so make sure you're either being really careful or maybe put on some of those finger protectors. To further embellish my paint sticks, I took these push pins and I only had them in gold, red, and green. So I decided to paint them silver with some metallic silver paint that I had. And then being the type A personality that I am, I had to measure this out, but I'm also not that great at measuring, so I tried to make sure that everything was even, but I kind of abandoned it once I figured out what center was, and then I just placed 3 push pins along both the top and the bottom paint stick. I added some green leaves to my pumpkin off of a floral pick that I had, and then I took some green wired ribbon that I got from the Dollar Tree, and I cut off the wired section, and that's what I curled around my pen to make a little curly vine on my pumpkin, and hot glued that down. To make it a little different than my typical jute hanger, I'm still going with the natural look, but I took some of this rope from the Dollar Tree and I just made a loop at the top. I'm going to end up just leaning this sign. I'm not going to actually be hanging it, so I didn't have to do this for a functional purpose, but I did just hot glue this down into the center, and you could use it if you wanted to make it hanging, but I know that I'm just going to lean this. I already have this DIY displayed in my home, and I think it's perfect for early fall, but will also work when we transition into more Thanksgiving time. Next up is an adorable piece of Scarecrow fall decor, and what makes it even better is that it glows at night. Here are the supplies that you'll need to create this. To begin, I am taking a wood crate from the Dollar Tree and I am painting it in a shade called Territorial Beige. It's just a basic neutral color. I also took a wood plank from the Dollar Tree. These usually come in a set of 3, and I painted that using the color Celery by Waverly. These scarecrows from the Dollar Tree came in a set of 2, which I thought was an amazing deal, and I loved the green coloring of this one's hat. So to have this as a backing of our wood crate, I just hot glued the scarecrow to the top of the wood plank, and then using some more hot glue, I am going to attach the wood plank to the back of the crate. For this next step, we are going to be taking some floral foam, and I ended up just using this block. You see me putting in more. I thought that I would have to fill up the entire crate, but I actually didn't because I had a lot of my fall florals hanging over. And I just picked up a bunch of different fall floral picks from the Dollar Tree. I really loved these white ones that came with the little white pumpkins, and I'm just arranging it how I like. I'm not the best at flower arranging, but I try to follow the thriller, filler, and spiller row, so you have something as your thriller centerpiece, something as just a small filler to fill in the gaps, and then something as a spiller, which usually spills over to add a bit of dimension. And of course, it would not be a fall DIY if I didn't put in some magical fairy twinkle lights. These are some copper lights from the Dollar Tree, and I just wove these in through the fall florals. Let me know in the comments down below if you have started decorating your home for the fall season. DIY for today's fall video are these light up Thankful and Blessings bottles. Here are all of the supplies that you'll need to recreate this. I got these 2 bottles from Aldi. They were filled with sparkling lemonade, and not only were they delicious, but I kept the glass bottles around because I thought they'd be great for a DIY. So I'm starting off with the shade Vivid Orange by Folk Art, and on one of the bottles I did 3 coats, and on one I did 2 coats. If you plan on putting lights inside the bottle like me, I would recommend 2 coats, but if you're just going to be putting on the vinyl lettering, then I would go with 3 coats. So once these were all dried, I actually used Dollar Tree vinyl. I've had a really great luck with it, and I wrote out Thankful and Blessings and placed those going up on the bottle. And then to cover up the top section of our bottle, I just took some jute and wrapped all around. It was a little bit difficult with this stopper on top, but once I figured out how to go around that, I just continued going all around with my jute. To embellish the tops of the bottles, I made my own kind of custom floral picks using these orange berries from the Dollar Tree as well as some different leaves from the Dollar Tree. And I just hot glued those to the top sections of my bottle. And on this second bottle, I used these green, kind of like foam beads that are supposed to look like berries from the Dollar Tree. Then to make these light up, I am taking some cork lights that I got off Amazon. I will link them down below. I got a pack of, I believe, 10 or 12, and they came out to about $1.25, I think $1.30 exactly. And I placed those down into the bottle, and I love the way that they look all lit up at night. First up is a patch of pumpkins made from children's socks you can find at the Dollar Tree. You can make this DIY really rustic by creating your own faux rusting muffin tin, or make it a little more farmhouse by placing it in a basket or using just one on a tiered tray. Here's what you need. To start off this DIY, I took a pack of white children's socks from the Dollar Tree, and then I just cut off the top portion as well as the heel of the sock. Now we're going to begin dyeing our socks orange so that they begin to look like pumpkins. I took one of these trays from the Dollar Tree. It came in a 2-pack, and I poured in just a bit of water. And then also from the Dollar Tree, I'm using orange paint and just one very small dab of brown paint. Then for the next section, I decided to put on some plastic gloves so that I didn't dirty up a brush. So I put on my plastic gloves and then I just mixed everything together, the paint and the water. So we have a stain, but it's pretty paint heavy. Then I took my freshly cut sock and I am just mixing this all up in the paint so that it is going to be dyed. And I did this with all 5 other socks that I had already cut from the Dollar Tree. Then I left this outside in a sunny patch and I let it dry for 24 hours. It was pretty saturated, so it took a while to dry. I saw Silver Farmhouse create this DIY on her blog, so I am just recreating it. And she took a muffin tin, mine's from the Dollar Tree, don't know where she got hers from, and I'm roughing it up a bit with sandpaper because we're going to be applying this cinnamon paint mixture to it. And it might have worked on hers, but for Dollar Tree items, I tend to rough them up, especially if they're metal before, just so it adheres a bit better. And I am taking Mod Podge and cinnamon. We're going to be creating a faux rustic, or not rustic, rustine, but I guess that's very rustic, faux rusting effect. And I ended up adding a tiny bit of brown paint as well to this mixture, because you'll see me smearing it on at first, and I'm like, it kind of just looks like mud. I'm not getting that rusty effect that I really wanted, so I do end up going back in with a little bit of brown paint. And I also found that using a brush versus like a popsicle stick or your fingers worked better. It just kind of spread everything out a bit more, and also dabbing it made it look more rusty too. It was, a little bit of trial and error trying to make sure that it had a rusty effect and not a mud splattered effect. And I think I was able to achieve it, especially in the lower right-hand part of the muffin tin. I think that really looks more like rust than mud, and I just continue doing this all over the muffin tin, not actually going in where our pumpkins are going to go because they're going to cover up everything, but I just went along the top and sides of our tin. The socks are now dried, and it's time to turn them into pumpkins. So I am taking this filling and just stuffing it into our sock, and you actually need a lot more than you probably think. You want it to be quite full. And then I am taking a cinnamon stick. I broke it in half. This is going to be the stem of our pumpkin, and that's going to go down in the center, and I'm just tying this in with a piece of jute. Again, you're probably going to need more stuffing than you think. I made a few with a little bit of stuffing, and they didn't end up looking like pumpkins, so you definitely want it to be very full. Now it's time to start making this orange ball look a bit more like a pumpkin. So I am not tying, just wrapping jute around that stem top portion of our soon-to-be pumpkin, and then I am just taking the jute across and very tightly pulling it before wrapping it around again, and then taking the jute and again very tightly pulling it underneath the pumpkin. You can see this is starting to make the seams in the pumpkin. I ended up doing this 3 times so that I would have 6 lines of jute or seams. And again, you really want to pull them tight so that the stuffed pumpkin is poking through and really protruding in between each of the jute sections. And you don't have to worry about having this perfect because I'm going to tie this off, and it doesn't look very pretty at the top, but don't worry, we're going to cover it soon. And this is when you can really play around and manipulate the jute and just pull it around so that your pumpkin has even little indentations or seams. Now that I've done that on all 6 of my pumpkin socks, I'm going to make some leaves for my pumpkins. So this first one I kind of used as a pattern, and I'm just taking some dark green burlap ribbon that I got from the Dollar Tree, of course, and just cutting out little leaves out of it. I'm using these small precision scissors, also from the Dollar Tree, the Crafter Square section, and they're my favorite for making small intricate cuts. And to make everything a bit more rustic, I kind of did this by accident with the first one. It started fraying, but I actually really liked how it looked. I thought it looked very rustic. So I just pulled off the edges on the leaves so that they were nice and frayed and looked distressed. Next, to make it really look like these pumpkins were coming from the pumpkin patch, I grabbed some Spanish moss and my hot glue gun and just started putting it all the way around that cinnamon stick on the top of the pumpkin. I love the extra rustic look that the Spanish moss gave to my pumpkins, and after I put it on top of all of the pumpkins, I went back in with the burlap leaves, and some I kind of pinched close together. Some leaves I had lying flat on the pumpkins. I wanted them all to be a little bit different, and then I put them on different sides of the cinnamon sticks. Then once I had all of my leaves on before I was complete and wanted to put them in the tin, I saw these really cute labels from the Dollar Tree, so I went ahead and put pumpkins on one of them. And silly me didn't realize that they were stickers, so I just placed it onto a piece of computer paper and then cut it out so that it wasn't sticking to my pumpkins. And after I cut out this label, I just took some jute and made a little tie, and then I brought over my pumpkins in a muffin tin, and over one of them I just put it over top of the cinnamon stick so that it was just hanging off. I absolutely love how these turned out, but if the muffin tin is a little too rustic for your taste, you can always style the pumpkins on their own or put them all together in a basket to display for the fall season. Next up is some more pumpkin decor using the wood ornaments from the Dollar Tree. Here are the other supplies you'll need. I got quite a few requests in my last video on how to make a fork bow, so I knew that I had to do a DIY incorporating that. So first off, to make this craft, I am taking one of the pumpkin wood ornaments from the Dollar Tree, and I traced it out onto a piece of burlap fabric. But after I traced it out, I realized that probably wasn't the best route. There were small little indentations of the pumpkin that you couldn't really see, so I just cut out kind of around that area and put Mod Podge down onto my wood ornament, and then I placed the burlap fabric onto that, and I figured I would do more intricate cutting once the Mod Podge had dried. And I did just place a coaster over it so that it dried nice and tightly to the wood pumpkin. And again, once that had dried, I went in with my tiny precision scissors and was able to cut a little bit closer to the wood ornament and get more of those intricate little indentations on the top and bottom sections of our pumpkin. Next, I took one of the small wood pallets from the Dollar Tree and using a wet paper towel and some Waverly stain, I went ahead and just stained the entire wood palette, even getting into those inner sections just in case that they showed through. While the wood palette was drying, I moved back onto my pumpkin ornament. So I took some of this orange paint, actually called Pumpkin by Waverly, and painted the burlap. It looks like it's clinging in some places to the burlap, but once it dried, it all dried out the same color. And I also took some brown paint for the stem. Then I wanted to make a layered bow, so first off I took a small piece of green ribbon, then laid a longer piece of jute down the center. I folded the ribbon over the jute, then pulled nice and tight and made a knot, and this is a really quick and easy way to make a simple bow. Once you've tied the knot, then you can fluff out the bow, and especially if it has wire like this one, you can make it form really in any way that you want. You can have it curved on the edges or make it large. Alright, now moving on to our fork bow, which so many of you requested. You are going to take your fork and your piece of ribbon and kind of make a V shape. So one piece of the ribbon is behind the fork and one is in front. The piece of ribbon that is behind the fork, you're going to pull through and poke it through the very center section of the fork. So you will poke that through and pull it behind. Then while you're pulling it behind, you're going to come up and over that same center section of the fork, and then you just make a knot. It's really that simple. When I'm making the knot, I try to pull the ribbons down a little bit just so it lays flat. Then you just gently slide your bow off the fork and you have this really tiny, very delicate looking bow. And I'm going to show you all again just on a blank background. I thought the one with the paint might have been a little confusing. So again, you are making this kind of V shape, poking the ribbon through the center of the fork, going over that other piece of ribbon. Then you pull it behind, and while you are pulling it behind, you are going to go up and over that center section of the fork again. And you can see the bow is starting to form. And then you are going to tie those two pieces into a knot. Again, I like to kind of pull the ribbons down so it's a bit of a flatter bow. Then you can flip the fork over, you see the really cute bow, and gently slide it off. Once my bows were done, it was time to hot glue them in place. I first glued down the green ribbon, and then I put our newly formed fork bow on top of that. And then I hot glued the wood ornament onto our wood palette. As the last little embellishment, I took some green floral wire and just wound it up around a really small pen so that it made this kind of curly Q. And then I hot glued that underneath the ribbon so it looked like vines coming out of my wood pumpkin. Let me know down below in the comments if you've ever done a fork bow before, or if you know of another way to make a bow that I should try. The last DIY is a super quick and easy one. You can make it in under a minute. Here are the supplies that you'll need to create this toilet paper pumpkin. First off, you're going to need a roll of toilet paper, and then I took a piece of orange fabric. This one is about 18 by 18 inches, but since there's no sewing or glue involved, you'll be able to tell if you have scrap fabric and you start wrapping the pumpkin and you find out you need more. You can always go ahead and go in with a larger piece. That's the other really nice thing about this DIY, is there's no glue or tape or sewing or any of that involved. You're just going to place the toilet paper on top of the fabric and start tucking the fabric into the center of the toilet paper roll. And then I just took a twig from outside and a leaf that I got off of one of my fall floral picks and just placed it to the side. It's super easy. I've done it with an apple, now a pumpkin. I just have to figure out how I can do this for the winter season. Let me know in the comments down below if you have any ideas. First, we have to disassemble the yard sign. I did this by gently pulling the arrow and truck off of the stake, and it came off pretty easy. Next, I took a utility knife and scored right underneath the pumpkins. Don't worry if your knife doesn't go through all the way. Mine didn't on the first try, but you can easily bend the truck and trim off any of that excess cardboard with a pair of scissors. Now it's time to load our truck, so I took my hot glue gun and added straw all along the back of the truck. However much or little you use is completely up to you. I ended up adding a little bit too much, so I took some scissors and trimmed the back to give it a bit more of a clean look. Now I'm going to be adding the pumpkins to the truck. So first off, I took this set of 3 orange pumpkins, and they actually came on clips, which were really easy to take off. I couldn't find the orange pumpkins on sticks at my Dollar Tree, but it wasn't a big deal. I just took the white pumpkins on a stick and broke the stick in half, and that fit perfectly into the orange pumpkins. And from here, you get to just have fun arranging your pumpkins however you want in your truck. Just make sure to hold the stick in the hot glue until it fully adheres. You don't want your pumpkins rolling off your truck, because mine definitely did the first time I did this. So make sure that you hold that stick in the hot glue. While I'm gluing down the pumpkins, I also wanted to let you know that I did a small makeover on the 25-cent per pound arrow sign. Before, it had an outline of really bright red glitter, which was falling out everywhere, so I sanded that off and replaced it with a matte red paint border. I also changed the red lettering to black, just using a black Sharpie marker. And the hot pink things on my fingers are some finger protectors from the Crafter's Square section of the Dollar Tree. When you're working with hot glue, especially on this part, they've really helped me from burning myself too much. This next step is optional. I'm just using a ribbon and hot glue to further secure the pumpkins to the truck. You could just use some plain old tape or skip this step if you have a stronger glue gun than me. I added some sunflowers as little embellishments on the truck. You can use other flowers or whatever craft supplies you have hanging around your house. Then I glued the front of the truck to the very top of the yard stake, and here I am trying to figure out where I want the placement of the back of the truck to be. Then I hot glued a wooden dowel to the back of the truck. You could use a stick you find outside, a popsicle stick, whatever you have around the house. Then I hot glued that to the yard stake sign, and I also secured it with a piece of black duct tape just to make sure it was secure. Lastly, I am hot gluing the arrow sign onto the yard stake at a slight angle, and then you are finished with your farm fresh pumpkin sign that you DIY'd from the Dollar Tree. Shout out to Lemon Avenue for being the inspiration behind this project. I will link her wreath video on this below. One lucky winner is going to win 3 of the brand new Dollar Tree 2023 calendars. The first one is the Farmers Market calendar. I think this is my favorite one out of the whole bunch because a lot of the images will be great for crafting. Another calendar that's new is the 1 day at a time calendar. This would be great to use literally for a calendar, but I also thought the bumblebee image and some of the words and sayings would be really great for DIYs and crafting. And lastly, one lucky winner is going to get the Dream Big calendar. This one's really fun and colorful. So again, one lucky winner is going to win all 3 of these. I'll have the rules listed down below. Just write me a comment saying what you're most excited for this fall. Good luck to everyone. I'm going to start off by taking this Thankful and Blessed pumpkin sign from the Dollar Tree, and the Thankful and Blessed has a lot of glitter on it, so instead of sanding it off and having to paint over that glitter, I just flipped the sign over and started painting. I'm using the color Pumpkin by Waverly and Vivid Orange by Art Deco. A bit of a painting hack from me is how to get really pretty shading that looks like it's seamless in with your decor. You don't want super harsh lines, you want it to be nice and blended. And how I do this is I don't wait until the paint is fully dry, I wait till it's about 75% of the way dry. So there's still a little bit of wetness to the paint, and I just find when I go over that with a darker color and start shading, it just blends in a lot better and looks more natural and not so obvious. So here I am taking the color Pumpkin by Waverly, and I had added a little bit of brown from, I believe it was my Folk Art Brown Umber, and I just added that in to make the definition lines in the pumpkin, and then I went in with a little bit of white paint and added some highlights. At the bottom of my pumpkin, I had ran out of the pumpkin ornaments that the Dollar Tree has, but they did have these that were covered in a paper with a buffalo check, and I decided to paint over that. I'm going in with a mixture of the Waverly pumpkin color and a bit darker of the brown, and I thought that it blended a little bit too much into the large pumpkin sign, so I really dirtied it up to make it look like it was a pumpkin from a pumpkin patch, using some brown paint, adding in the definition lines, and going all the way around the pumpkin, and also painting the stem brown. These were really cute pumpkin. They didn't say they were ornaments, it just said pumpkin decor at the Dollar Tree. I did like the buffalo check, so if you go for more of the black and white theme, I think that would be cute. And I am making 3 pumpkins, one for myself, one for my boyfriend, and a special one for our dog because he is obviously the head of the household. So for this other one, I did the exact same thing, painting it orange and adding the brown paint all around the edges and on the stem. And for the center pumpkin, which is going to be my dog's pumpkin, I painted that in this blue, slightly green color. It's called Agave by Waverly. and I really have liked using it for my fall decor. I picked up these adhesive dots from the Dollar Tree, and I really like to use them on projects recently, especially on ones like this that I'm constantly adjusting and moving things around. It's so much less permanent than hot glue, so you don't have to get everything perfect on the first try. You have the ability to move and shift things without that commitment of hot glue. I also made a bow out of some burlap ribbon. If you want a tutorial on how to make a bow like this, I will link above in the upper right hand corner my latest video where I explain this in detail. And to hold up the sign, I had already cut off the jute hanger, so I just made a new one. And I still felt like there was a little something missing, so using raffia, I made 2 small bows and placed those on the outer smaller pumpkins. The next craft is a set of tumbling tower blocks that I organized to look like cute wooden pumpkins. This DIY is fast and easy and only requires a couple of supplies. I'm starting off with the tumbling tower blocks from the Dollar Tree. Keep your eye out, they have a smaller container of these, but every year around Christmas time, they come out with the massive, jumbo pack of tumbling tower blocks, and they're already starting to put out Christmas stuff, so keep your eye out. It's usually in the children's toy section. So to start off, we're going to be making our tumbling tower pumpkins by painting them using Pumpkin by Waverly. Next, it's time to actually start stacking them. I did 5 tumbling tower blocks to a pumpkin, and I am staggering each of the tumbling tower blocks. The first and the bottom block I kept pretty symmetrical with one another, and then every other tumbling tower block I am staggering. This second pumpkin, a couple of the tumbling tower blocks weren't fully painted, so I just made that the backside. Make sure when you're putting these together, you are really looking at each of the tumbling tower blocks. I also took these small cube square blocks that you can also find in the Crafter Square section, and I painted them in a dark brown color and then glued them on top of our pumpkins, and that is going to be our stem. For the words that are going to be going on the 3 inner blocks in our tumbling tower block pumpkin, I am using my Cricut. You could always go ahead and write these out, but the Cricut just makes the words so pretty and crisp looking, so I decided to use the Cricut and my vinyl. To embellish our pumpkin, I took this green ribbon and I was going to make vines on my pumpkin. So I cut out the wire part. I didn't have any floral wire, so this was a quick way to make it by curling it around a pen. But I ended up not really liking it. I kind of left it there while I made this bow out of raffia to see if I would warm up to it. I thought it was cute, but something about it just was kind of throwing me off, so I ended up ditching our vine and just going with the raffia bows. I think it would be a really cute one to do with kids as long as you handle the hot glue gun and they could grab a pen and write out some words that they associate with fall. The last DIY for today's video uses a shadow box from the Dollar Tree. This is another relatively fast DIY. So for fall time, the Dollar Tree came out with these shadow boxes, but they come out with them for pretty much every season. And I ended up just pulling off the welcome fall section, and I'm going to be using one of these pumpkin wood ornaments. And at first I was going to add some of that really pretty scrap picking paper, but it kind of clashed with the black and white buffalo check, so I just ended up painting the pumpkin orange. I'm using the color Pumpkin, again by Waverly, and then painting the Hello Autumn in black. And the Hello Autumn wood cutout came with, I believe, 3 or 4 other cute fall sayings, and my Dollar Tree just got these in, so I was kind of bummed because if I got them earlier in the fall decorating season, I could have used them more in my DIYs, but I had to at least get them in one more, and I did finish a little bit more on the pumpkin. I added some shading and a bow, but I already showed you all in the first DIY how I paint and shade, so I figured I would speed things up a little bit and just use some magic to show you the completed pumpkin. Instead of using hot glue, I am taking the Pop Dot adhesives from the Dollar Tree again, to adhere the pumpkin down onto those little foam blocks that are already in the shadow box. I used those adhesive dots, surprise, surprise, yet again to adhere the Hello Autumn onto our pumpkin. And then as the final step in this DIY, I'm going to be making an X or a crisscross bow. And I did this by taking 3 different types of ribbon. The larger one I did cut in half because it was pretty thick. And then I just cut doubles of each of them, and each one got a little bit shorter as I went up in the X bow. And I just crisscrossed them in an X, and I did stagger them out a little bit. When I first put it on, it looked a little too much like an X, and I wanted it to look a little bit more like an autumn leaf, which I think it really did, especially when I added the little cuts in the ends of the ribbon to make it look all fancy. And then I added a raffia bow in the center. All I did was wrap the raffia around my hand a bunch of times so it made a circle. And then when you tie the jute in the center, it turns the raffia into a bow. I used another one of those adhesive dots to adhere the bow to the top of our DIY. Again, really liking using those because I never have to worry about hot glue or burning myself. And with the bow on top, that completes our last DIY. Thanks for watching. Until next time, keep searching, keep creating.